welcome to Southwest. I'm Anusha Ravi Sood, and today I have the pleasure of bringing to you Dr. Shashi Tharoor. He's in Karnataka. He's been campaigning over the last 3 days, which brings me to the question: how crucial is the Karnataka election for the Congress, considering it is no longer just the matter of one state?
No, I agree with you. I think it's a rather important election for a number of reasons. First, we had done rather well last time around, and the election was essentially, I'll use a blunt word, stolen from us. Operation Kamal was a cynical exercise in the manipulation of democracy, because when people elected on one ticket are essentially, I was going to say purloined, I think I can say that, to another political party, without any particular issues of principle or ideology or anything else involved, I think it's rather cynical. It's bad for our democracy. So number one, it's an opportunity for the voters to make very clear what they feel about that. Number two, it's also a message against misgovernance. The BJP has spent too much time in too many states thinking that they don't need to worry about looking after the welfare of the people as long as they demonize minorities, talk about Hindutva, delve into the depths and the abysses of history to come up with all sorts of unfortunate, shall we say, allegations about the past, when their job is really to take care of our future. And I think that that's something which the voters are also pretty sick of. Thirdly, the record of the present government in Karnataka has been so bad, particularly all these stories about contractors writing to the Prime Minister saying they're getting demands for 40% kickbacks and commissions. We've got the municipal corporation claiming it's 50% there. This kind of nonsense has to stop. As I said yesterday to the press, instead of 40% commission, what we need is 100% commitment, and the Congress is prepared to offer. On the larger national picture, because we have been out of power in 2 successive general elections, state elections are a place where we can actually demonstrate our continuing hold on the electorate. Now, as you know, currently we are in power in 3 states, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, and now Himachal Pradesh. Hope to expand that. And of course, Karnataka being a very important state, larger in fact in both size, population and GDP than any of those states, would be a particularly valuable feather in our cap and would send an important message to all concerned, to the public at large elsewhere and to the BJP, that we are a viable alternative to the misgovernance the country has received from the BJP.
Speaking about elections, what has changed for you, or has anything changed for you in the Congress after your AICC president?
I think it's too early to answer that question, because Mr. Kharge has really not been given enough time to settle down. He's had an AICC session, but he hasn't yet had time to name his working committee or announce any reorganization thereafter. He's also had a major election taking place in his home state, which naturally occupies a fair amount of mind space. And then we've had the setback of the Rahul Gandhi disqualification, which needs to be converted not from a setback into an opportunity. Because the truth is that it has actually been bad news in many ways, but good news in terms of having provoked a certain amount of unprecedented opposition unity, as parties which in their states have been opposed to us, having opposed to the Congress, have come out supporting Rahul Gandhi in Congress on this issue. And I think that's rather important. So we should welcome, it seems to me, all of these developments and give Mr. Kharge time to put his own stamp on the leadership of the party.
Like you pointed out, a lot of parties that otherwise do not resonate with the Congress, whether it is the BRS or TMC, have shown solidarity with Mr.
All the
Rahul Gandhi.
BRS, TMC, Samajwadi, Aam Aadmi Party in Delhi, the CPIM in Kerala, which is really bitterly opposed to us in Kerala. And the very next day after they expressed support, they wanted to clarify hastily that they're not supporting Congress, they're merely supporting democracy. But as I said to them at the time, that's fine, because democracy is what's at stake.
Like you pointed out, when there are these parties that have supported or shown solidarity with Mr. Rahul Gandhi, there are also your allies who probably have a different tone to speak about when it comes to issues that he very passionately takes. For example, the Adani issue. Mr. Sharad Pawar also categorically I wouldn't say defended, but at least justified that his stance on the Adani take. I would like to understand your stance on it, because there is a port that is being operated by Adani in your constituency as well. And I remember in 2017, or before that, you had passionately defended the need for that particular port to be developed.
Well, the port has a certain history. the demand for a port was first voiced on the floor of the Kerala Assembly in 1992, way before I came into politics. When I entered politics a decade and a half later, it was one of the most compelling demands of the people of that region. And both, if you like, the development lobby, they're always interested people in every community, in every constituency who want to see development. Both they and the local residents who are looking for opportunities, jobs, and so on, all came to me saying, can I do anything to back this? And I certainly strongly supported the then Congress government, as we call it UDF, United Democratic Front, government in Kerala, which floated a number of tenders for the port. Now, the first couple of tenders went awry because the companies that won the bids were subsequently disqualified by the Home Ministry, which was also a Congress-led Home Ministry, because of their connections with Chinese companies and so on. And therefore, a third bid or tender had to be announced. But when that third one was announced, literally no one bid. Now that a couple of qualified bidders had been knocked out earlier, no one was willing to bid. And at that point, the Chief Minister spoke to me and said, look, with all your international connections, can't you get someone interested? This port really matters to Kerala. And I said, yes, I'm totally convinced, because this port, apart from being in my constituency, actually is the only port in India that offers 24 meters of undredged depth, which means the largest, most modern container vessels can come there without daily dredging. Whereas the port we have developed in Kochi has only 8 meters of depth, and daily dredging is a very expensive calculus that the port authorities there need to take. So, convinced of the arguments, I said I would do my best. And by sheer fluke, I was on a flight to New York, an Air India flight to New York, and found Mr. Gautam Adani in the queue for boarding. I'd never met him before. I had no clue. I had no personal connection with him, but I certainly had a clue who he was. So I approached him and said, this is who I am. He knew who I was. And I said, look, I'd like to have a chat with you about this particular idea. He said, let's chat during the flight. So though our seats were not adjoining, I went and had a word with him during the flight and sort of interested him in the merits of the Vizhinjam port. Because I knew he was a port operator. He had done the Mundra port in Gujarat. He was active in Maharashtra, in Southeast India, and so on. So he seemed interested. And sure enough, after we landed in New York, he instructed his company to call for the tender documents. And I was very pleased when a few weeks later he did bid, or a few days later he did bid. And when he bid, his turned out to be the only qualified bid. The others were disqualified on technical grounds. And that qualified bid was given the contract. So I felt very pleased that this chance encounter had given us a viable bid for the port in Thiruvananthapuram. Now, I should say that on this issue, we are trying to build a tangible asset for the benefit of India, because at the moment, Colombo is thriving on traffic, 80% of which is destined to India. So container ships don't have a place to go to in India of that kind of depth. They go to Colombo, they unload all their stuff, which is then transferred to smaller ships and go up to India and so on. I think an Indian port should get that business. And that's why I supported this concept. Plus, unfortunately, we know that the Chinese have a very major interest in Colombo, and their naval vessels have been calling on that port. So I also feel there's a national security dimension to ensuring we keep all this in our country. And this is why I supported the port venture, and as an MP for Thiruvananthapuram, I make no apologies about having done so.
Does that put you in a sticky position, given how the Congress leadership is going
No, it's unconnected. I think the Congress leadership is asking specific questions about inflated values of assets in other companies, and particularly of alleged investments by shell companies that the Hindenburg report has alleged, and so on. And I think what they're doing, in all fairness, is asking questions. And they're saying, let's have a joint parliamentary committee, which in fact under our rules would be chaired by the majority party, would be chaired by the BJP, would have a BJP majority, but it could certainly ask questions and call in records to find out if any irregularities do exist, or whether any laws of the land have been affected. Mr. Adani assures the nation that there aren't any irregularities or illegalities, in which case it's up to Mr. Adani to convince the authorities that there's nothing to worry about. I mean, that's the logic of a JPC. Don't forget that the Congress government gave in to the demands for a JPC on the telecoms issue, when the BJP in opposition demanded it. But it looks like there's no reciprocity in politics these days. What the BJP demanded and the Congress conceded 10 years ago is not apparently something the BJP is willing to concede 10 years later. That is the unfortunate aspect of this.
Right after the AICC presidential election, you did this tour of Kerala, got the endorsement of the very powerful NSS, the Nair community as well. They broke away from their general, we will keep a distance down. So it begs the question, was the entire AICC presidential poll a bid for Shashi Tharoor to take one step closer to the chief minister candidate?
No, actually, I was very genuine in my involvement in the AICC presidential poll, because don't forget, my entire 15 years in politics have been spent on national and international issues. I have never really seen myself as a state-level politician, and though I'm very proud of having worked hard for my constituency and for having actually worked with the various authorities on delivering specific tangible projects for my constituency, and I'm proud to be known as an effective constituency MP. Nonetheless, my vision has always been national, and but when it became clear that perhaps there was not going to be that sort of role available at the national level, and as you know, I'm not a young man anymore. I had a full career outside before coming into politics, and I do want to make a difference before I decide to turn in my dinner pail, as they say. I decided that it would be useful for me to also explore possibilities where I was in demand. I mean, all these are invitations that came to me. I didn't seek any of these. Don't get the impression that I went and conducted a campaign. Far from it. I just accepted invitations that had been extended to me and was gratified at how these invitations multiplied, and the substance of them, and the fact that they were accompanied by a great deal of interest and support, and a publicly expressed wish that I should come and take myself more seriously in state-level politics. Now, I've not, the party has made no decision, I've made no decision, but I've certainly not said anything beyond that, other than that, when people invite me, I'll come and speak. I'll address the problems of Kerala as I see them and suggest ways forward as I see them. And I will always be available to the people of my state. That's basically the message, and that message has been heard across the board. It's not just the Nair Service Society. I've been warmly received by various Muslim community groups, various Christian community groups, various bishops, cardinals. So I've really reached out across the entire spectrum in Kerala.
Perhaps why you've ruffled a few feathers in the Kerala unit of the Congress.
Well, I'm not doing any of this to ruffle any feathers. I'm doing this for the benefit of the state and of my own party in the state, and only they would perceive that.
My last question to you, young and old leaders alike, whether it is Mr. Ghulam Nabi Azad or Anil Antony, a whole lot of younger leaders of the Congress have been joining the BJP. You answered this question yesterday also, that you're disappointed with the kind of choices they've made. But in an interview, very interestingly, Anil Antony also pointed to how well-meaning individuals in the Congress are subjected to cyber attacks, bullying from within the party spectrum. Is that an extension of what Mr. Ghulam Nabi Azad says, that there is this huge resistance to any kind of change, any kind of renaissance, if I may say, in the party?
Well, look, I mean, it's clear that there are always going to be some entrenched vested interests in any institution who would not want to see changes in that institution because it would undermine or jeopardize their interests. I mean, that's normal. Where is there an institution you can find in which change is heartily welcomed by those who would lose out because of that change? I mean, the truth is that change is something which threatens people's interests, or some people's interests, everywhere, wherever change comes. But that doesn't mean that change shouldn't happen, especially when there is popular demand for it. So, certainly I was one of those who urged the party president, Sonia Gandhi at that time, to permit a certain kind of change in the functioning of the party that would open up the space for discussion and democratize the functioning of the party. And I signed on to something, an initiative that was undertaken by a number of senior leaders with a lot of experience in the party who knew what they were talking about. As you know, it was not welcomed, and subsequently some of the signatories to that letter have left the party, and some have indeed, objectively, let's say, been sidelined or marginalized in the party. Those are not necessarily good things, because obviously I very much value the Congress's habit of bringing everyone along and being a big tent, as we say, where people have different points of view, different even on economics, for example, we have very, very left-centre, almost Marxist colleagues, and we have right-of-centre liberal economists all together under the same roof. And that's the sort of thing in the Congress that has usually worked well. So many of us have stayed on, battled on. I've had my unfair share of personal denigration from within and the knives in the back and all the stuff that some of these people have alleged. But I've stuck it out and I've done my very best, and we'll see whether that's indeed recognized or not as the party comes up with whatever changes the new president is likely to bring along. I express regret not so much about those who have left to start their own party like Mr. Azad or those like Mr. Sibal who have just stayed independent, but rather those who've gone over to the party that ideologically is most opposed to what the Congress stands for. My logic is that the entire business of politics is a battle of ideas, of principles, of values. And I think if you start betraying, to use a very strong word, all the principles and values that you have fought for and that you've articulated, that you've defended, that you've spoken on behalf of, to go to a party that believes in the exact opposite, then what are your principles and values worth? It's more a question of reproaching the moral integrity and the intellectual integrity of these friends. I'm not challenging their rights to make their own political choices. God knows everybody in every democracy can change their mind. But it seems to me that in this particular instance, it is they themselves who have lost out by letting themselves down in this regard. Whereas anyone who leaves a party while staying true to what they believe in, Mr. Sibal has been very clear that he has changed not one iota of his beliefs, that he prefers not to be in this particular organization, but to stand on his own. I have not said one negative word about that. And I think that there is a difference. There is a real difference between my critique of principles and the issue of party affiliations. I recognize that in our country people have different choices. I know voters can vote for one party, one election, another party, another election. That's their prerogative. That's how democracy works. But if you are a committed politician with political convictions, then I would urge you to be true to your convictions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tharoor.